I 28F, need to lay this all out here. My twin sister Emily and I have had this rivalry for as long as I can remember. I guess that's not unusual for siblings, but in my case, it wasn't just between us, my parents were actively pushing us into it without even realizing. They've always treated Emily like she's something special, and I was just there. Let me explain why this happened. Emily is exactly 12 minutes older than me. Yes, you heard that right, 12 minutes. That's apparently all it takes to become the golden child in my family. From the moment we were born, Emily was a miracle baby, the one who could do no wrong. Meanwhile, I wasn't a bad kid or anything, but no matter what I did, she always got the praise. The earliest memory I have of this favoritism is from kindergarten. We were both in the school play. Emily got 2 lines as a flower, while I had the lead role as Little Red Riding Hood. During the performance, Emily forgot her lines and started crying on stage. My parents immediately rushed to comfort her, completely missing my entire performance. Later that night, all they could talk about was how brave Emily was for trying, while my achievement wasn't even mentioned. This pattern continued throughout elementary school. If Emily got a C on a test, it was, "Oh honey, you tried your best." But when I got straight A's, I'd barely get a nod. I remember this one time in 4th grade, I spent weeks working on a science fair project about renewable energy. I studied, built models, and even interviewed local environmental scientists. My project won 1st place, but when I showed my parents the blue ribbon, they barely looked up. That's nice, but Emily had a tough day at volleyball practice. Can we talk about this later? I stopped showing them my awards after that. The worst part was how they didn't even try to hide their favoritism. At family gatherings, my dad would joke about how Emily was their firstborn, and even though we're twins, those 12 minutes somehow made her the older sister. He'd say things like, "Emily's our responsible one, she takes care of her little sister." I was standing right there, listening to them diminish my existence to nothing more than Emily's shadow. Middle school was when things really started to affect me psychologically. I developed this intense need to prove myself. I joined every club I could, debate team, math club, student council, you name it. I stayed up late studying, determined to be the best at everything. Meanwhile, Emily just coasted through, doing the bare minimum but somehow always getting more attention and praise. There was this one incident that really stands out. In 8th grade, I was chosen to represent our school at the state-level mathematics competition. I spent months preparing, often studying until 2 or 3 in the morning. The day of the competition happened to be the same day as Emily's recreational soccer game. Not only did my parents not come to support me, but they didn't even ask how it went when I came home with the 2nd-place trophy. All they could talk about was how Emily's team lost their game and how she needed cheering up. High school was more of the same, but with higher stakes. I was taking all AP classes, maintaining a 4.0 GPA, and still participating in every extracurricular I could manage. Emily barely maintained a C average and spent most of her time at parties. Yet somehow, she was still the social one, the fun one, while I was labeled as too serious and competitive. Our senior year really highlighted the disparity. I was named valedictorian, got accepted to a prestigious university on a full scholarship, and was even featured in the local newspaper for my academic achievements. Emily barely graduated and got into community college. Yet at our graduation party, which was supposed to be for both of us, my parents spent the entire time consoling Emily about not getting into her first-choice school. They didn't even mention my achievements in their speech. The turning point came during college. I was studying computer science at a top university, working part-time to support myself, and still maintaining perfect grades. Every break, I'd come home hoping things had changed, that maybe my parents had finally started to see my worth. But no, it was always Emily this, and Emily that. She had dropped out of community college after 1 semester, but somehow that was spun into her being brave enough to follow her own path. Then came Thanksgiving break during my junior year. My uncle, who had always been a bit too fond of whiskey, let something slip that changed everything. He was reminiscing about when my mom was pregnant, and he revealed that my parents hadn't even planned on having twins. They only wanted 1 child, and when they found out they were having 2, they freaked out. My mom had been worried about how they'd handle 2 babies, and my dad, being the passive person he is, just shrugged and said, "We'll figure it out." But their way of figuring it out was to essentially pick a favorite and pour all their attention into her. And of course, that favorite was Emily, their precious firstborn, those crucial 12 minutes making all the difference in their minds. I was sitting at the dinner table when my uncle revealed this, and suddenly everything clicked into place. All those years of wondering why they didn't care about my accomplishments, it all made perfect sense. I wasn't the child they wanted. I was the unexpected addition, the afterthought. That revelation changed something in me. I stopped trying to win their approval. Instead, I focused entirely on building my own life. I threw myself into my studies and internships, determined to succeed not for them, but for myself. By the time I graduated, I had multiple job offers from top tech companies. I accepted a position as a software engineer at a promising startup, and within 3 years, I'd worked my way up to senior developer position. Meanwhile, Emily had met some rich guy at a bar, had a whirlwind romance, and was planning this elaborate wedding. My parents were over the moon, of course. They spent hours on the phone with her discussing wedding details, while they couldn't even remember what company I worked for. The irony was that I was actually doing extremely well. My company was preparing for an IPO, and my stock options were worth more than Emily's fiancé made in a year. Not that they ever asked about my career. The wedding fund situation was what finally broke me. Our grandmother had always been the only one who treated us equally. Before she passed away, she left each of us a significant amount of money specifically for our future weddings. She'd made it very clear that the money was to be split equally between us. I remember her telling me privately that she knew how my parents treated me, and this was her way of ensuring I'd have something that was just mine. But of course, my parents couldn't even respect her final wishes. Emily wanted this absurdly expensive wedding. We're talking multiple venues, designer dress, celebrity photographer, the works. Instead of telling her to scale back or asking her rich fiancé to chip in more, they decided to dip into my portion of the inheritance. They didn't ask me. They didn't even tell me. I only found out months after the wedding, when my drunk uncle, yes, the same one, let it slip during another family gathering. When I confronted them about it, their response was infuriating. My mother just waved her hand dismissively and said, "Oh honey, we were going to tell you eventually. We'll pay you back when we can." My father's response was even worse. "Well, Emily needed it more. She's the traditional one getting married, and you're so focused on your career. You probably won't even want a big wedding anyway." I stood there in their kitchen, looking at these people who were supposed to be my parents, and I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just this profound emptiness. They couldn't even understand why what they'd done was wrong. In their minds, taking my inheritance without asking was perfectly acceptable because it was for Emily. It had always been about Emily. That night, I went back to my apartment and really thought about my life. I realized that every major milestone, every achievement, every proud moment had been overshadowed by Emily or dismissed entirely. My high school graduation? They were too busy consoling Emily about her grades. My college scholarship? Barely acknowledged because Emily was struggling with community college. My first promotion? Ignored because Emily was planning her wedding. I opened my laptop and did something I should have done years ago. I wrote them an email. "I know about the wedding fund. I know you spent my inheritance on Emily's wedding without even asking me. This isn't just about the money, it's about how you've treated me my entire life. I was never the daughter you wanted, and you never tried to hide that fact. I'm done trying to earn your love and approval. I'm done being the child you never wanted. Please don't contact me again unless it's to return my money." I hit send, blocked their numbers, removed them from all social media, and felt this immense weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time in my life, I didn't have to worry about measuring up to Emily or seeking approval I would never get. The past year has been transformative. I focused entirely on my career and personal growth. Our company's IPO was successful, and my stock options are now worth more than Emily's entire wedding cost. I bought my own place in a nice part of the city, started therapy to deal with my childhood trauma, and built genuine friendships with people who actually value me for who I am. Emily occasionally tries to reach out through mutual friends or distant relatives. She'll send messages saying things like, "You're still my sister," or "Family should stick together." But where was this family sentiment when she watched our parents dismiss my achievements all those years? Where was it when she happily accepted my inheritance for her wedding? She was just as complicit in everything as our parents were. Some family members have tried to guilt me, saying I'm being too harsh, that blood is thicker than water, and all that. But these are the same people who watched my parents favor Emily for years and never said a word. They saw how I was treated and stayed silent. They don't get to have an opinion now. The funny thing is, cutting them off has shown me who my real family is. My best friend from college who helped me move into my new place, my coworkers who celebrate my achievements, my therapist who's helping me understand that none of this was my fault, these are the people who actually care about me. The company I work for recently opened a new office in another state, and they've offered me a position as team lead there. It's a huge opportunity, and for the first time in my life, I'm making a decision without wondering how it will compare to Emily or what my parents will think. I'm living my life for me, and it feels incredible. So, Reddit, AITA for cutting them off completely? Sometimes I wonder if I'm being too dramatic about all of this. But every time I think about possibly reconnecting with them, I remember all those years of feeling like I wasn't enough, and I know I made the right choice. But now things are about to get even more complicated, and I need your honest opinions about what I should do next. Update 1. Things took a dramatic turn 2 weeks ago. I was in the middle of a team meeting when my phone started buzzing with multiple calls from my uncle. My first instinct was to ignore it. After all, family calls usually mean drama. But something felt different about getting multiple calls in rapid succession, so I stepped out to take it. "Hey, it's Uncle Greg," he started, his voice shaking slightly. I could tell something was wrong immediately. He's usually the kind of guy who's always upbeat, even when things aren't great. "I need to talk to you about your parents." My stomach dropped. I hadn't heard from them in 2 years, and I knew this couldn't be good news. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "They've been in an accident. A pretty bad one. They're in the hospital." He paused, and I could hear him taking a deep breath. "A truck ran a red light and hit their car. Your mom's got multiple fractures, and your dad, he's in critical condition. They've been in the hospital for a few days." "Days?" I repeated, my voice rising. "And no one thought to tell me until now?" "They wanted me to let you know," he said, his voice softer now. I think they want to see you. But that's not all. There's a problem with their insurance." Of course there was. As he continued talking, I learned that my parents had let their health insurance lapse 6 months ago. They'd been struggling financially, something about bad investments and credit card debt. The medical bills were already piling up, and they were nowhere near being released from the hospital. "What about Emily?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Uncle Greg sighed. "She came by once, right after the accident. But she said she can't help with the bills. Something about not wanting to ask her husband for money so soon after their honeymoon. She's busy with her new family, her stepkids." I had to laugh at that. Typical Emily, always having an excuse. The same Emily who had no problem accepting my inheritance for her wedding was now too proud to ask her rich husband for help with our parents' medical bills. After hanging up with Uncle Greg, I sat in my office for a long time, staring out the window at the city skyline. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was actually in a position to help them now. My stock options had vested, and I had more than enough savings to cover their medical bills. But did I want to? For the next few days, I couldn't focus on anything else. Every time my phone buzzed, I jumped, expecting another call about their condition. I kept thinking about them lying in hospital beds, probably wondering if I would show up. Part of me felt guilty for even considering not helping. They were my parents, after all. But then I remembered everything. The years of favoritism. The stolen inheritance. The way they only reached out now because they needed something from me. This wasn't about reconnecting or making amends, this was about money, plain and simple. I received a text from Emily 3 days after Uncle Greg's call. I know you're doing well at your job. Mom and Dad really need help. This is your chance to do the right thing. My chance to do the right thing? Where was this moral compass when she was spending my inheritance on her wedding? Where was it during all those years she watched our parents dismiss my achievements? Finally, after a week of internal struggle, my parents called themselves. My mom's voice was weak, clearly affected by pain medication, but her manipulative tactics hadn't changed a bit. Sweetheart, she started, as if the last 2 years of silence hadn't happened. We're in a really tough situation here. The doctors say the bills could go up to $200,000, and that's not including rehabilitation. We know we haven't been the best parents, but... I cut her off. No, you haven't been. And you still aren't. This is the first time you've contacted me in 2 years, and it's only because you need money. That's not fair. My dad's voice came through, he must have been on speaker. We're your parents. Family helps family. That phrase, a family helps family, it triggered something in me. Years of suppressed anger bubbled to the surface. Family helps family? I repeated. Where was that sentiment when you spent my inheritance on Emily's wedding? Where was it when you missed my college graduation? Where was it during every single important moment of my life that you ignored because you were too busy fawning over Emily? The line went quiet for a moment. Then my mother started crying, those familiar, manipulative sobs I'd heard so many times when she wanted to make me feel guilty. How can you be so cruel, she whispered. We're in the hospital. Your father might need surgery. Are you really going to abandon us now? I took a deep breath and said what I'd been wanting to say for years, actually, yes. I am. You abandoned me emotionally my entire life. You only saw me as Emily's shadow, as your backup plan. And now that Emily won't help, you turn to me? No. I'm done being your last resort. But we're family. My father started. No, I interrupted. We're not. We haven't been family since you decided Emily was the only child worth loving. I'm done. Don't contact me again. I hung up and blocked their numbers again. Then I sent a final text to Emily. They're your parents too. Figure it out yourself. The next few days were hard. Really hard. I kept having these moments where I'd question my decision. Was I being too harsh? Should I help them despite everything? But each time those thoughts crept in, I remembered how they treated me all my life. How they only reached out when they needed something from me. Uncle Greg called again yesterday. He tried to guilt-trip me, saying my parents' condition was getting worse, that they needed surgery and physical therapy. He mentioned how they were talking about remortgaging their house, how they might lose everything. But here's the thing, their financial problems aren't my responsibility. They made their choices. They chose to favor Emily. They chose to spend my inheritance. They chose to let their insurance lapse. And now they're facing the consequences of those choices. Some might say I'm being cold-hearted. Maybe I am. But I spent my entire life trying to earn their love, trying to be good enough. And I'm done. I'm done being the backup plan. I'm done being the responsible one who has to fix everything when Emily won't step up. I know this makes me sound heartless, but for the first time in my life, I'm choosing myself. I'm choosing my mental health over their guilt trips. I'm choosing my financial security over their poor planning. Reddit, I know I asked before if I was the asshole for cutting them off, but now I need to know, AITA for refusing to help them with their medical bills? Even my therapist seems unsure about this one. Part of me feels guilty, but another part feels like this is just another example of them only wanting me around when they need something. And trust me, this isn't even the end of the story. Things are about to get even more complicated. Update 2, 3 days ago, my life took another dramatic turn. I was having a quiet evening at home, just unwinding from a particularly intense day at work where we'd finalized plans for our new office launch. I had classical music playing softly in the background, a glass of expensive red wine, a small luxury I now allow myself, and was reviewing some project documents when my doorbell rang at exactly 8:07 p.m. I wasn't expecting anyone. Most of my friends always text before visiting, and I hadn't ordered anything. Looking through the peephole, I froze. There stood Emily, looking every bit the privileged trophy wife she'd become, head-to-toe designer outfit, perfect makeup, and clutching what I recognized as a $15,000 Hermes Birkin bag. The irony wasn't lost on me, that bag alone could have covered a significant portion of our parents' medical bills. For a moment, I considered pretending I wasn't home. But something had changed in me over the past few weeks. I wasn't the same person who used to shrink in Emily's presence. I'd spent too many years being intimidated by her, letting her win. Not anymore. Opening the door, I channeled my best corporate boardroom energy, cool, collected, and slightly dismissive. "Well, if it isn't my dear sister," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "What brings you to my humble abode?" She brushed past me into my apartment without waiting for an invitation, typical Emily behavior. Her eyes scanned my living space, taking in the modern furniture, the floor-to-ceiling windows with their city view, the original artwork on the walls. I could see her mentally cataloging everything, probably comparing it to her McMansion in the suburbs. "Nice place," she said, her tone suggesting exactly the opposite. "Very cozy." She emphasized cozy in that particular way that wealthy people use to describe anything they consider beneath them. "Cut the small talk, Emily. Why are you here?" She adjusted her scarf, a nervous habit from childhood, and turned to face me. "Mom and Dad are getting worse. Dad needs emergency surgery for internal bleeding they didn't catch initially, and Mom's physical therapy isn't covered by their payment plan. The hospital is threatening to stop treatment unless they can show proof of payment. They're talking about selling the house." I noticed she was clutching her designer bag tighter, her knuckles turning white. Classic Emily Tell, she was building up to something. And that's my problem because... I raised an eyebrow, deliberately mimicking her condescending tone from our childhood. "Because you can help them," she snapped, her perfectly maintained facade cracking slightly. "I know your company went public. I looked up the stock prices. I did my research, you have the money." I had to laugh at that. The sound echoed off my apartment walls, probably harsher than I intended. "Oh, so you've been keeping tabs on me? How interesting. Tell me, did you do this much research before spending my inheritance on your wedding? Or before refusing to help them yourself? Where's your rich husband in all this?" Emily's face flushed red, another childhood tell I remembered well. When we were kids, that flush always preceded one of her dramatic outbursts that would inevitably end with our parents consoling her. "That's different," she sputtered, her composure slipping further. "I have a new family now. I have responsibilities, stepchildren to think about. James and we have our own financial plans. I can't just throw money at every family emergency that comes up." "Can't just what?" I cut her off, my voice sharp. "Can't just help the parents who gave you everything? Who spent my inheritance on your wedding? Who always put you first? Who missed my college graduation to help you move apartments? Those parents? That's ancient history." She waved her hand dismissively, though I noticed she took a step back. "This is about now. They need help, and you're being selfish." That word, selfish, coming from her mouth was the final straw. A lifetime of suppressed anger and resentment suddenly crystallized into cold, clear purpose. Without saying a word, I walked to my home office, grabbed my laptop and some documents from my desk, and returned to the living room. "You want to talk about money, Emily? Let's talk." I opened my portfolio dashboard and turned the screen toward her. "See these numbers? These are my stock options. Let me break it down for you in terms you'll understand. This is worth more than your husband James makes in 3 years. That house you're so proud of? I could buy it in cash tomorrow if I wanted to." Her face went from red to white as she stared at the numbers. I continued pulling up documents, my salary statements, my investment portfolio, the recent offers I'd received from competing companies. But you work in tech. You're just a programmer. She stammered, her voice small for the first time I could remember. I'm a senior development director now, Emily. While you were playing house with your rich husband, I was building something for myself. And unlike you, I did it without stepping on anyone else. I closed my laptop with a decisive click. I could help mom and dad. I could pay their medical bills without even touching my savings. But I won't. You're being cruel, she whispered, but I could see the realization in her eyes. Her little sister had completely outmaneuvered her. No, cruel is watching your sister be ignored her entire life and doing nothing. Cruel is taking her inheritance without asking. Cruel is showing up at her door only when you need something. I walked to the door and opened it. We're done here. Don't come back. She stood there, clutching her expensive bag like a shield. You'll regret this, she tried one last time, but her voice lacked its usual confidence. When they lose everything. The only thing I regret is not cutting all of you off sooner. Goodbye, Emily. After she left, I poured myself another glass of wine, a $200 bottle I'd been saving for a special occasion, and this felt like one, and walked out to my balcony. The city lights stretched out before me, a tapestry of possibilities and freedom. For the first time in my life, I felt completely liberated. No more guilt, no more seeking approval, no more living in Emily's shadow. The next morning, my phone exploded with notifications. Emily had apparently spent the night calling every family member she could reach, telling them how I'd changed, how success had made me cold and heartless, how I was abandoning the family in their time of need. Uncle Greg sent me a particularly lengthy message about family obligations and karma. I responded by sending the family group chat a comprehensive folder, scanned copies of my inheritance documents, bank statements showing how they'd taken my money for Emily's wedding, text messages from Emily refusing to help with the medical bills despite her wealthy lifestyle, and finally, a breakdown of my current net worth, highlighting exactly how much I could help if I wanted to. The family chat went very quiet after that. The only response came from our cousin Angela. Holy shit, you really did it, didn't you? You actually succeeded on your own. Over the next few days, I finalized my plans for the future. I accepted that promotion in another state. It comes with a significant raise and an even larger stock option package. I put my apartment on the market. The real estate agent thinks it'll sell well above asking price in this neighborhood. I've already started looking at properties in my new city, maybe a penthouse this time. Last night, I received one final text from Emily. Mom's crying every night because of you. I replied with a screenshot of my inheritance documents and added, she had years to cry about how she treated me. Her tears don't work anymore. Then I blocked her number, along with every other family contact I had. It felt like closing the final chapter of a book I should have finished reading years ago. Reddit, you've been incredible throughout this journey. Your support helped me see that I wasn't crazy for feeling this way, that it's okay to choose myself over toxic family members. Every time I doubted my decision, your comments reminded me why I made this choice. Someone recently messaged me asking if financial success was worth losing my family over. But here's the thing, I didn't lose a family. I freed myself from people who never treated me like family in the first place. My success isn't what changed me, it just gave me the confidence to stop accepting their treatment. To everyone who shared similar stories, who offered advice, who simply validated my feelings, thank you. You helped me find strength when I needed it most. Next week, I start house hunting in my new city. New job, new home, new life. For the first time, I'm excited about my future without the weight of family obligation holding me back. Aita? Maybe to some. But I've realized something important. Sometimes being called an asshole by toxic people means you're finally standing up for yourself. Thank you, Reddit. You helped me find not just my voice, but my worth.